Thank you very much. And I'm well aware that I am the only thing that stands between you and lunch. So I'll keep this short and sweet. Now, let me guess what you might be thinking. I thought this demo was from the Global Forum for Media Development, but I'm looking at a white Englishman. Maybe you're thinking this, and you'd be right to ask that question. So let me explain a bit about GFMD. I'm very privileged to work for the Secretariat of the Global Forum for Media Development, and our mandate comes from our over 140 members from every corner of the globe. The big ones, like CFI, and smaller national level media support organizations. And we have many members who are here at this forum today. Arij Al-Kat from Tunisia, Deutsche Welle Academy, Fondation Hirondelle, International Media Support, Media Foundation West Africa, Megaphone Lebanon, OCCRP, Sami Kassir Foundation, Panos Southern Africa. And every 4 years, all of those 140 members, they elect a steering committee, and those representatives give us direction to prioritize where we can collectively advocate and do work on behalf of the sector. And that's led by our chairperson, Zoe Titus from Namibia, who is the director of the Namibia Media Trust. And we have two of our steering committee here today, so they're basically my boss. We have Fusumusu Salifi from Panos Southern Africa, and Ayman Mana from Sami Kassir Foundation. There may be others, but it's from these individuals and these organizations that GFMD works, and to do our best to represent their collective needs in international fora and in regional fora. So, what do we do with this mandate? Firstly, we argue that countries that care about democracy, transparency, human rights, good governance should increase their support for independent public interest media at home and around the world. We remind donors, policymakers at the European institutions, OECD, UN, you name it, that the fact that media assistance receives only 0.3% of all overseas development assistance, 0.3%, and has remained at that level for far too long, and we argue it should be at least 1%. We remind them that strong independent media is essential if they want to address growing authoritarianism, rampant disinformation, and it's a pillar for sustainable development. We also tell them that the fact that only a fraction of that 0.3% actually reaches national organizations working in countries, and we have to improve that as well. Now, this drive for insights into policies and strategies that are needed to create an enabling environment for free, independent, and ethical journalism is why GFMD acts as a convener for the sector, to bring together our members with donors, researchers, and academics to constantly revisit our assumptions about what works, what doesn't work, and why. And with this growing evidence base, we are trying to bring in new money into the media support sector, public, private, and from philanthropies. And we're also working with institutions such as the OECD to codify principles for effective media assistance. Now, there are many journalists in the room, and you're very familiar with the ethical principle of doing no harm. But what does doing no harm mean when it comes to international support of media? I wonder, how many of you in this room have been encouraged to indulge in counter-narratives or stratcom, strategic communications, to push back against propaganda? Perhaps your editorial agenda has been skewed at times by the topics which funders are willing to support. And that, obviously, as you know, will have troubling repercussions for the trust that your audience has in you. Now, issues gender, climate, and other topical reporting is absolutely essential. But, as the saying goes, the road to hell is paved by good intentions. And we have to consider how we can support reporting without instrumentalizing the media organizations that we are supporting and giving them the editorial decision on what their audiences need to know, rather than it being dictated from elsewhere. How many of you have had to apply for a grant that was designed in a European capital or North American capital that does not allow you to use that support in the most effective way that responds to your needs and those of your audiences? Perhaps you applied for it anyway for lack of alternatives. How many of you have seen consultants sent to build your capacity while at the same time the support that you get can barely cover your basic costs? Now, we as a sector have to do better than this, and sometimes we do. But with the very limited resources that we have at our disposal, juxtaposed against the huge challenges that we have to face, we have to do better more often and more consistently. Now, words like decolonization, localization have been buzzwords in our sector for years. But what has actually changed, or how much has changed in the power dynamics between us? Like our needs assessments, so studies of what kinds of support are needed, which is a precursor to funding being distributed, who is carrying that out? Is it by a trusted local actor, or is it done by an external expert who has been helicoptered in? Are key trusted national actors with a proven track record being given the tools to lead, or are they a junior partner in projects dominated by international organizations? Are some programs still motivated by strategic foreign policy agendas, or do they show genuine solidarity and encourage holistic support to journalists, media organizations, and national media support organizations? Again, sometimes the answer to those questions is positive, but sometimes is not enough. We, as a community of all those who understand that the future of journalism and its ability to play its role as a public good is so seriously threatened, we have to keep asking ourselves, is this really the best way to do this? And what is stopping us from doing it differently? Now, we're entering a period, regrettably, that looks something like the Cold War in some ways. A period where there's going to be a temptation for the European Union and foreign ministries and development agencies of individual countries to see media assistance through the prism of competing for hearts and minds around the world. Now, we are already seeing the effects of this. Many of our members complain the only funding available to them is fact-checking or media literacy, for example. Now, I love fact-checking, I love media literacy. Many of you do great work in that regard, and we've heard about it, and we will hear about it. But I'm not talking them down. But if that's the only thing you can get funding for, that's a problem. And we need better coordination between donors to address this so that they're not always following the latest trend, and so that the holistic needs of a national media ecosystem can be addressed. Now, do we really want to get to a point where everyone does propaganda and all we're left to argue about is who does it for the right reasons? I would say that we don't want to get there. And that's one of the things that we can do collectively, is to argue about how we can do journalism better and put forward journalism on its own as a positive case, as a public good, as is articulated by the UNESCO Plus 30 declaration, and not always as a means to other ends. Now, and finally, because I know you're hungry and I'm the one standing in the way. The other area that we need to come together as a community is how we engage with tech platforms and on digital policy and internet governance. Now, those of you from smaller media markets will know how hard it is to have any meaningful interactions on policies and moderation of Meta or Google. And we have to insist that they are not allowed to divide and rule. Too often, they will engage one-to-one with different organizations in a country, or they'll go one-to-one with different organizations. We have to approach them collectively, and we have to make sure that small and medium-sized media organizations, especially in markets that are not so profitable or not a priority for those platforms, that they are heard. Now, we have a number of ways of doing this. We have a number of kind of policy initiatives which are trying to do collective work in this space. I won't go through them all now because you're waiting to eat, but I would encourage you to please work with the Global Forum for Media Development, because together we can be much more than the sum of our parts, and we can make sure that if it's advocacy to donors, if it's advocacy to tech platforms, we have to do it collectively. We can't do it as individuals. We do not have the capacity, the funds to compete with the lobbying efforts of the big tech platforms. So we have to at least try and do it together. So if you are a policymaker or a donor, please work with us. See us as a friend who will be brutally honest with you at all times. And we want to help you make more informed decisions. We have a help desk to respond to your questions, and we use our community to get you the best answers. If you're a researcher, let's create a shared research agenda that finds the gaps that we have and addresses them to inform all of our work. If you are a media support organization and you're not already part of our community, please join GFMD. You have many members here you can ask, and we would love to have you. If you are a journalist or an editor, also, please join our network. We have a dedicated part of our membership, which is specifically for small and medium-sized media organizations, so that we can make sure that you have a voice directly in discussions on media policy, internet governance that affect you. So if any of this resonates with you, please come and talk to me. Please find us online. We can do more if we do it together. Thank you, CFI, for organizing this amazingly diverse forum. And thank you for our translators, without whom we would all be in the dark. So thank you all, and bon appetit.